Hey, I didn't see you there. We are Agora Forum, here with a special guest, Maggie Pryor. I'm Addie.
I'm Fiona.
I'm Paulina.
I'm Lindsay.
And today we're going to be talking about a very special topic, language. Okay, so first, definition of language.
Ooh, okay, I think the definition of language is being able to communicate with other people.
Verbally?
Yeah.
But
Body
also,
language.
Sign language.
Ooh. Okay, you got me there,
Okay, so we're thinking of doing multiple topics. Subtopics in language, topic of idealism, specifically what Borges talked about, because almost all of us have read Borges, talking about slurs,
like hate speech.
the power of language,
Mm-hmm.
and like colonialism as well, and rise of globalism, as well as, what were you guys saying?
Language and intellectualism and how they can interconnect.
So who would like to start off? Any questions?
Do we think, what are your guys' opinions on if people are fighting and in sign language and somebody just turns off the lights?
Isn't that just someone walking out?
Well,
Or, like, closing,
no.
It's just like you can't have someone closing their ears.
That's when it turns physical.
Yeah. I mean, but I think it's slightly more disrespectful in my mind, especially if it's someone not a part of the argument. Like, if I were arguing with Paulina here, and someone, as we do, and someone put noise-canceling headphones over both of our ears, it would seem incredibly, it would, like, make us feel like children.
Yeah.
It would,
Demeaning.
exactly, and it would take away our autonomy. And I think something that a lot of deaf people struggle with is, like, the lack of autonomy. And, yeah.
Okay. I have a question. No, it's a genuine question.
Okay, go
Like,
on.
you know how in Lit we talked about how sometimes translated texts lose their meaning and their nuance? What are your guys' opinions on that?
I think that each language, like, so Maggie, you're almost fluent in French, right? Yeah, sure. Okay, so like, and like we speak to a degree of Spanish, right? So we say, like, sometimes there's not direct translations for certain words, and sometimes connotations are, like, extremely different, and I feel like so I was talking to Chris, who is actually reading Borges non-translated, and he says that he hates it. Like,
why does he hate it?
Because he hates the writing style. He said that it's not universal, and it's too specific to the culture, that it's really hard to understand as a kid that wants to read Borges, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that translation is a different, I don't think it's exactly word for word, because sometimes words don't have a specific translation. Do you know what I mean?
And also, like, there's so many cultural contexts within linguistic practices that, like, for example, if you say, "Oh, that's phi," in English, right? Phi has phi has so much connotation. It's like, "Oh, that's phi," like about it's a drag term or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And it, like, brings in a bunch of different cultural contexts that I feel like you can't get if it's translated. You know what I'm saying?
Actually, I did one of my TOK objects on this, and I talked about the ethics of translation, because, pivoting a little bit, art restoration is, like, a huge thing, especially nowadays as we've gained the technology to properly restore art without damaging it. But the whole thing about art restoration is we have to make sure our work is seamless. We want to, make sure that the original artwork is preserved to the best of our abilities, and everything that we do has to be able to be undone. And translation is similar in that sense, where it's, like, kind of, it's not restoring art, but it's like making art more accessible to the masses. And so what are the ethics of, like, changing the connotation and changing the actual meaning of the work?
I have a question first, actually, which is, what creates that ethical obligation to make sure that your work is seamless?
Art. I feel like art and that in general,
Like, do you want me to elaborate on that question? what are the pros and cons, right? Like, what really forces us to make sure that the work is seamless? What's preventing us from saying, you know what, I just want this to look, for example, in Greece, I went to Greece last year, and a lot of the times the ruins were there, and they were like, well, we can't really reconstruct them perfectly because we didn't know what they look like, so we're just going to leave them as ruins. And so then all of a sudden, you don't have this preservation of culture because it's like, well, we can't do it seamlessly. So why, like, would you prefer not having restoration over having
something wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And why?
because I feel like it's an art. Architecture is an art, and language is an art in a way, and the whole thing about art is trying to communicate a message, and if you change it in a way that alters the message, then it's changing the communication.
Then
You know
who's
what I mean?
who's that harming?
The artist.
And
Yeah.
if the artist is 3,000 years old,
Then it sort of degrades their
Integrity.
integrity and their intent for what they wanted to do.
Lizzie.
I would say that everything is a shortcut. Like, you talk about translation, but it's kind of like, is this really a problem or just like an inconvenience and a matter of fact? Because what is the alternative to not translating? What is the alternative to not restoring?
Learning the language, not understanding.
No, who has, okay, not to sound like disrespectful,
Yeah.
but not everyone has the ability to like spend all this time learning a language. So I think it's better that Borges is translated and more people have accessibility to it than actually like having this seamless authenticity in essence. But in I would say in architecture, particularly within restoration, it's the fact that it's not the same artwork or architecture. You don't have the historical context beyond it. If you restore it, it's not the same thing.
on top of that, so let's say you're an artist, you're dead, you've been dead for a while,
Yeah.
or you could be alive, whatever. Da Vinci. So let's say, right, it's either your work doesn't get shared with the masses, or your work is left in this kind of
And
niche.
Frank.
Yeah, sure. Let me.
I
finish.
guess, bro.
Or it gets left in this kind of niche community. So let's say, like, you, for example, let's say it's an indigenous language and it's an artwork or literature created in indigenous language, and people don't they like can kind of translate it, but they don't think they can do it seamlessly.
Yeah.
And so it's either your language gets lost because you're like, it's not seamless, and therefore your work is not spread to the masses. And this can be viewed in the market as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, all the translated text that we read, whatever, Banana Yoshimoto, right? One big thing for artists is money.
Yes.
That's a big thing, right? And so is it like, okay, you know what? You can't claim that, well, and we should be preserving the integrity of the artist, so we shouldn't be, translating, we shouldn't be restoring, when, what if their original intent was for their art to be shared with the masses?
Yeah, so one thing that reminds me of is Pride and Prejudice, actually. So Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, it was originally written in the intent to be sort of like quippy, sort of like being on edge and like an edgy book, basically. And eventually, since we became more contemporary, if you read it now, it's like, oh, it's a boring book, you know what I'm saying? And different adaptations, they changed the language to make it more, like, I was in a play version of Pride and Prejudice that was like completely very contemporary, very modern, but I feel like it changed it in many ways, but I feel like it still has the intent that Jane Austen wanted by changing it to make it more contemporary.
I would say, go.
That kind of links back to my response about the architecture,
Yeah.
because I think that one thing about like restoring art, especially from older times, is as our culture changes, we interpret things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to leave our mark of our culture on that piece of work instead of preserving it in that timeline. But you bring up a great example where in the later past, her work was very edgy,
Yeah.
and now we don't see it that way because our culture has evolved to the point where what was edgy back then is no longer edgy.
Yeah.
And by creating adaptations, we're able to like bring back the author's intent.
Yeah.
Because we make it more culturally relevant.
Yes, I feel like translations in a way help preserve it instead, even though it's changing a lot of it, but it's still helping keeping this sort of phenomenon alive in that way.
I also don't think the artist's intent really matters at all. Like,
Ooh.
I would say, like, I'm gonna bring up like Da Vinci here. Da Vinci did not want his work shared. Like,
And Frank.
Da Vinci was not a scientist. He wrote in mirrored handwriting and never shared any of his work. He didn't contribute to, like, humanity's progression in scientific knowledge. He wanted to be revered like a great artist by, like, having this mystery.
Yep, I mean, like, I did say Anne Frank because I genuinely feel like if my diary in that time was read to the masses, there is ethical implications, as you were talking about. I feel like we do need to talk about the ethical implications of it. So, first of all, spreading like, knowledge in forms of writing is super important. And also, it was translated, wasn't it?
In Frank?
And
Oh,
it totally was. It was translated. So I think that's also a thing that we should think about. Like, what sort of things, what would we think about Anne Frank if it wasn't translated? What type of things would have been changed? Cultural things as well.
One thing I think about a lot is in The Good Place. Remember in the first episode when, have you guys watched The Good
Yes.
Place? When Eleanor is talking to Chidi, and Eleanor is like, wait, like, how do you speak English so well? And Chidi's like, oh, I'm speaking French. That was so weird to me. I was like, how are they communicating? And the whole time I was watching The Good Place, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he was speaking French, because how is it being translated in real time, and how is what he's saying actually what
He
like
means?
yeah, it like really stuck with me.
There's this discussion of, like, the author's intent and their purpose, but I feel like it doesn't matter because none of this, like, if nobody cares about it and if what you're creating elicits no emotion in the reader, then it doesn't matter anyways because you're irrelevant. I don't
But,
say
like,
irrelevant.
Okay, so I was thinking of, Islam was extremely focused on mathematics, on science, on intellectualism, right? That was that place in,
Because they thought it was God.
Alexandria.
They were like,
I think.
Library of Alexandria?
I think in the area, very focused on that, and they and Muslims were the people that did a lot of translation, and that was actually how the Romans and the Greeks and got their information from. It was from the Muslims, but there was a series of translations. So what would happen if those mathematical equations, those scientific inventions were, or like different equations and thoughts and philosophies went through series of translations that changed what we believe.
Like, you know, when you put something in Google Translate and you do it
Yeah.
back over and over and over again, and it completely changes its meaning because the translation is not one-to-one.
Exactly.
But don't you think, especially for something like mathematics and science, we don't need it to be a perfect translation? Because our human minds are capable of the exact same thing as any other human mind. And therefore, if we have a starting point, if we have a basis, and they say gravity, blah, 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 and they tell us, like, something, and maybe it gets a little bit lost in translation, don't you think that from that starting point, we're able to come to the same conclusions?
It's like from Mean Girls when she says, "Why do you like math so much?" And then they're like, "It's the same in every language."
Right.
She was like,
It's like universal in a way.
but it
In a
would
way.
say that we don't, because the reason why you had the Middle East and China were so much more educated and why they were doing the translation is because they had paper.
right.
Europe didn't have paper, and so books cost like a house. So you can't really say that they would have been able to grasp that because, I mean, like, can you really figure out mathematical equations when you don't have paper to write
I
on?
also
That's
think
cheap.
that you can't claim that the human brain is capable of doing the same thing if you want to acknowledge the differences in the human brain, the differences in how nature versus nurture, neurodivergence. You can't claim that every human brain can come to the same conclusions, and that's one of the things that
But like
has
generally.
led humanity to have not even
No, because
generally.
that's what we were talking about, universality, in our TOK thing. Like, nothing's universal.
Yeah, nothing's universal. Not every human brain can come up with the same conclusion, and that's what leads to these cultural differences and these societal differences. Is that you come up with, like, you can make the same conclusions separately. You can, if we want to tie back to language, one of the most interesting things to me in Korean, there's a word called araso. It means okay or good. Don't fact check me on that. And then in Russian, harasho sounds almost the exact same, and it means good. And so I looked up how that word developed, and it developed separately and came to the same word. Like there was no crossover where that word
Convergent
developed.
evolution.
Right.
No.
But so you can claim that, but you can't claim that for everything, including mathematics and science. We're gonna come to different conclusions from the same information.
But at the same time, if we accept that science is science and is going to be almost universal, like we can accept that gravity is everywhere, right? Hold on.
I disagree.
I know that gravity is like different in some places, but there are certain like facts about the universe that are commonly accepted.
Like you're gonna
and,
die.
And universal.
Time
For
exists.
example, one thing that I'm thinking of is like scurvy, which was really bad when the Europeans started to sail and like got more advanced. But China had been sailing for centuries before that point. They had found a cure for scurvy so far ahead of the Europeans before the Europeans found this cure for scurvy. But they still came to the same conclusion without collaborating on that.
Was
Yeah.
it oranges?
Yeah.
Okay.
Citrus. It's vitamin C, I think.
Yeah, like remember when like we were trying to look for a freaking vaccine to COVID, and like randomly like 5 popped up, and we're all like, oh, and we like all got to pick and choose, and everybody like naturally came to the same conclusion.
I
Or different
don't
ones.
think you can use COVID as an example because the countries are working together. You can't say the countries are working individually.
Also, I would say it's a value issue. Like, you talk about math, but if you go to, like, Muslim architecture, it's very mathematical because they believed that it was a representation of God.
Aztec too.
And yeah, and like, oh, only something this perfect as, like, math shows could exist if, like, God exists. And so that's why you have this emphasis. And so, also with the sailors, like, the reason they didn't develop it is because they didn't need to, because they didn't value it, because they didn't have this issue because they weren't sailors. So.
Well, that then ties into our other topic about idealism. Going back to languages, I think we got a little off topic.
Can I give a quick definition?
Yes.
Okay.
Language?
So
Idealism.
Okay, so idealism is the which I did want to start off with, which because it was actually the first thing on our list. But idealism is the philosophical idea that our world is created from our minds and cultivated from our spirits, and it's basically very determined on us as humans. For some context, we have some of us have an understanding of that again from Borges because we read some of that as well, so we might reference him quite a bit. So yeah.
I think that there's actually a current debate happening in my very online world where people are saying that English is a very unromantic language, a very unemotional language, because in a lot of, or maybe it's too emotional. It's one of those two. I think it's actually, I think it's actually too emotional. A lot of people are saying that we're so stuck in our individualism because of the fact that we speak English. For example, in English we say, I am sad, I am tired, I am depressed.
Yeah.
Whereas in other languages, I think it's Chinese, it might be Korean, don't fact check me. They rather say something along the lines of, sadness is passing through me, tiredness is passing through me, and it makes it, and people are bringing up the fact that maybe it means that the people in those other cultures and who speak those other languages aren't as consumed by their own emotions because the language is different.
And also in Spanish, instead of saying I am sad, you say, or I'm tired, you say I am making myself tired. I am feeling tired from myself. Yeah.
But also, I would say that...
No, you say
Yo
soy.
soy cansado.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm relaxing myself. Or me relajarme.
That gives like what you're saying gives like kind of a sense of ephemerality. Like it's very like it's temporary, you know? Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say that culture, it seems like, is propagating and creating the language, and then the language in turn propagates the culture. And so you can't really say that it's the language creating the reality. The culture creates the language, which creates the reality.
I was gonna say religion, because if you look at religion across the Eastern and Western
Which
hemisphere,
will be one of our future episodes, by the way.
it's gonna be controversial.
Religion.
It's gonna be controversial.
We will have different people of different religions.
Are any of us religious?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, not me. But anyway, so Eastern and Western hemisphere, right? If we look at the Eastern Asian cultures and we look at their religions, they were really, really focused on everything as a force of nature. In the way that, like, I'm gonna bring up because I remember there's like Taoism, but I don't know if that's the right way to say it, so I'm gonna go with Shinto instead, which is Japanese. And so every like natural phenomenon had a spirit associated with it, and
Like
I
reasoning.
think it was Taoism, where they were
Taoism
saying,
is right.
yeah, Taoism, where they were saying like, and also Indian religions as well, where they're saying like, you know, everything works together. We are all part of nature. We're not like this like amazing thing. We work together with all the spirits kind of are around us, and because of this, when they say like sadness is passing through me, it's not, oh, I'm conjuring the emotion. It's like this emotion is a force outside of me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why that language is like that, versus you look at Western hemispheres and it's a lot more about like the individual. Even
Yeah.
like if you look at God as a figure, it's an individual. It's not these forces of nature. It's not like God is throwing down sadness, unless that's a thing. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't think God is sprinkling down like emotions onto us. I think it's
Yeah.
more conjured by the individual.
If we think about language in the sense of making oneself feel better, like you're saying, like how the emotion is a force passing through instead of you're conjuring that up, that reminds me of people saying you shouldn't fit into clothes should fit you. You know what I mean? And how a slight change in, like, for body positivity, and a slight change in like structure of a sentence can change people's whole perspective on the way they see the world in that way, which is very powerful to me.
Yeah. I was thinking about what you were saying about individualism, and I definitely think that is seen through language and how that also confers in the way we act towards one another, and then again, in turn, the way we feel as people. And I feel like that, like, when we were learning about the Samoans, like, the whole point of it is that they're not individuals. There's individuals, but they work as a group together.
Elaborate on what you learned about the Samoans for the class.
So, they basically this, you want to say?
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Basically, there's this There's this anthropologist who learned about, who researched Samoans. It was more aimed
The psychosexual development
Yeah.
of
So
Samoan
talking about,
girls.
Yes, about Samoan women, the way they view sexuality, menstruation, death, cycles of life. And so it talks about how there was such little shame about it. About death, about menstruation, about sexuality, about all of these things. And that's because of their familial structures and how they're not independent. And I think that definitely has to do with the way they talk to one another, right? If we're looking at the Hmong culture, they don't have a written language. They have a only oral language, and it's I'm not sure about the specific pronouns and stuff, but that definitely entails that they communicate to one another, and there's a sense of community that they have, which a sense of community that they cultivate. So I think that shows. And they work in clan structures, right? They think of family as family. So I think that's like an extremely important point, that language definitely leads to connection and different degrees of connection, I guess.
Do you guys think that languages generate our reality, or do you think no?
So I remember very specifically what Borges said about how language, it described the moon as what it was. It was a light orb in the sky, and then which led to like confusion with language, as there was like
there was no
different
nouns, correct?
Yeah.
So
there was no nouns.
context.
It was so there was adjectives, and it was a world where in which everyone described things using adjectives. So the moon was described as light, glowy orb, right? So
wouldn't glowy be in that?
I don't
adjective?
know.
Orb that shines light.
Yeah.
I think orb could also be thought of as a noun. Or
Glowing.
adjective. No, not glowing.
I don't know.
Anyways,
Whatever.
That's where the confusion of Borges was that he was like, this is a world where they don't have nouns.
Which ties into idealism.
Like, you don't say friend, you would say friendly, and then we got really confused about that language, but it ties into idealism
because it says that the way that we talk or communicate our language changes the way that we see the world, which is the very basis of idealism.
how did the citizens of the planet of this world see the world, and how is it different from how we see the world when we see nouns? Does anyone remember?
That's what we were debating.
I know,
just said that they would invent nouns because they can't see the world.
How did
without
Boyd
nouns.
describe? Just to offer
You know,
context.
I have a theory.
Yeah.
That, as I was saying before, that they're more connected because they don't have individual names, right? They don't, which would lead to, I guess, less hierarchy, right? So, like, I feel like names like principal, king, queen, whatever, I feel like that creates a sense of hierarchy. If we are solely going off description, I feel like this would create less animosity within the community, less divide, I guess. I don't know, though. What do you guys think?
Powerful, weak. That creates a divide, even though it's not nouns. But I think that I kind of agree with you, because if you don't have a title, then you have multiple who are powerful. Unless you have, like, literally everybody's weak and there's one powerful. But you still have more generalized kind of clumps of people, not...
To me, it feels reminiscent of how there's a perception of in hunter-gatherer groups. You had more of a, like, communal justice system, where it was, like, through gossip, like, if we find out that someone's, like, been really bad, like, that's when we'll take action. But you don't have this, like, judge, and they're gonna, like, judge, jury, executioner. Like, there's not that situation.
It's determined by majority, basically. Like,
Yeah.
majority, how does the majority of this group feel about a person? How have we been talking about them?
Mhm.
Cut out.
Yeah.
Cut off.
Cut off. Okay. Wait. Yeah.
I think this is kind of unrelated, but it kind of is a little bit related. In Korea, in all Korean airlines, they don't use English. They don't use Korean. All pilots have to learn English, and all air traffic controllers have to learn English, and they have to speak in English the entire time, because Korean is such a
Rare.
no, it's such a formal language, and there's such degrees of politeness at which we have to, like, talk to our superiors. And so there was this, like, horrible incident where one of these planes crashed because the co-captain couldn't address the captain with the sense of urgency needed because of the superiority in just the way that the language is formulated. And now...
Because English was less urgent?
No, because Korean was less urgent. And so now they all have to speak English, because English doesn't have those, like... Of course we've got, like, different levels of formalness, but it's not to the same degree and it's not to the same extent as in Korean. And so during urgent situations, during emergencies, we're able to address each other as equals, whereas in Korean, that's almost impossible.
So, yeah, I'd say that's an interesting point to say that I think that we should separate, like, metaphysical aspects of idealism versus physical, literal things. So, I think, yeah, structure, hierarchy, not communication, but, like, formality definitely, I think, creates things when we're talking about idealism. But, of course, I personally don't think that language creates objects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's, I think, I don't know if that's a direct thing of...
I think language creates hierarchy because if we look at schools, Mr. and Mrs. already, like, if you have a teacher and they're like, you can't refer to me as, my first name.
Mhm.
Just, you have to use a title, Mr. or Mrs. And then you go to, like, I don't know, you have, like, a coach and they're like, call me by my first name. And it's already, like, it's a kind of a difference in hierarchy. It's like we're on the same level, and this culture of respect derives from language. And also the flight that you were talking about was Flight 801. I looked that up. I fact-checked. It's real.
Period.
First, wait,
Yeah.
hold on.
No, but it's... No, not, like, to see if it was wrong, but to see if that was the actual cause, and she was right. What happened was the flight pilot was like, I'm gonna land, and everyone else was like, no, it's too dangerous. But the way that they speak in Korean, it's indirect, and it's kind of differential. It's like, it's kind of dangerous, but, like, you do you, and also there was a hierarchy created, so they crashed.
Okay, so I think that this is a good transition point to assimilation or the use of lingua franca. So, should I speak here instead?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lingua franca is, if I'm correct, a common language between others. So,
Our lingua franca.
our lingua franca is English, even if it's not all of our first languages. That used to be, so in African regions, that could be Afrikaans or Creole. It's different. It's different for different places, but English is commonly used as one. But what if we, to decrease our chances of having that sort of awful miscommunication, what if we all have a lingua franca? What are the benefits? What are the detriments? What do you guys think would happen?
All is in the entire globe.
Yes.
Yes.
The problem is just, can you have that without the extinction of other languages, really?
That's the issue. No, because this thing is all or nothing. We all have our own languages, or we wipe it out and we only have, let's go ahead and say English as the lingua franca.
Wait. Are you arguing that we should have a lingua franca and no other languages?
I'm
Or
not
that we
arguing,
should
I'm
have-
asking.
But I don't think
Wait.
that's possible. I'm saying
This is hypothetical.
I'm saying that if
Okay.
you adopt a lingua franca, you're gonna go back to having your own languages eventually. Because
How are you gonna gossip
culture
about
is
others?
generating language and culture is differing, and you're gonna have geographical barriers now.
Okay, but in a hypothetical
Yeah.
world where you can put the same language at everyone and get rid of all other languages.
To-
Would you?
Hold on. Because I think that we're saying that it's impossible, but with the rise of globalism and interdependence, our lingua franca is more commonly becoming English. And like, while it's not a lot of people's first languages, almost like a lot of major important sectors are done in English. Almost all flights are done in English. A lot of air traffic control is done in English. A lot of trading is done in English because the US and England were and are so dominant as superpowers. So we've found a lingua franca, and it has already shown that it leads to the extinction of
Yeah.
languages.
My interesting thing is China is such a large global superpower, and so is Russia. But because of the lack of, I mean, they have diplomatic connections, but because of their kind of like isolationist policies, please don't flag me for that, Russia and China. But it's not becoming the global language. It's also they're harder languages to learn because of their because of history, because they just haven't, their colonialism did not expand as far as British colonialism did. And because of that, people, like a lot of languages were derived from English, and a lot of languages share roots with English. Russia is a Slavic language, so if you're in the Slavic area, yeah, it will be easier for you to learn that language, but not in South America, not in North America, not in even, I would say, Africa. And then same for China, right? Like China had its connections with its area, but because it didn't go out all the way, because it didn't go out all the way, it's harder for us to learn Chinese. It's harder for us to learn how to write and speak it. I forgot the original question. Oh, should we have a lingua franca? I think a lingua franca is beneficial, but I don't think that other languages should be wiped out. The reason why I think that is because, again, of the nuance of the different languages that you can't capture with the same
I
language.
just think that there's one danger of this where dominant languages just keep on mushrooming into cultures like German has been almost stopped being used with the Amish, or less used with the Amish. Instead, they're speaking English. With the Han, they aren't using their ethnic language. They're using just Chinese, right? Their
Mhm.
main dialect.
Mhm.
I think that if we do have a lingua franca, at least if we're talking about in regions, that's dangerous because there's always going to be a risk of losing the traditional aspect of cultures.
I think it's, how much do you value the global economy? That's what a lingua franca would do. It would allow global interdependence.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And diplomacy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that either of those things would be at risk without a lingua franca. I think that right now, as I just said, we kind of already have one in English. Like, there are negative side effects of English becoming so predominant, but I think that if we keep it to a certain level, like, I don't want to gatekeep it for the people who are in the global economy, people who are doing business transactions. But why are, like, for example, when I was living in Laos, I had a friend at the French school, and she spoke English almost perfectly. She spoke English so much better than I spoke French, and we had been learning our respective second language, English and French, for the same amount of time, and yet she spoke English so much better because, like, Hollywood, and she just watched a bunch of American movies. So I think that instead of focusing on, like, saying that we should stop the spread of English, we should rather start uplifting
The spread of other languages.
exactly, and the integrity of other cultures.
But I just think it's really hard to, like, control the spread and the, I guess, erosion of languages if we allow for a lingua franca. That's the thing. So I think maybe we should talk about the ethical implications of the spread of English or the spread of languages, especially if we talk about colonialism. Of course, there's, like, countless examples of, for example, the Native Americans, they had to stop speaking their traditional languages and speak English, right? So that's the thing, it's really hard to control, whether that's, like, through force or whether it's through, like, intentional, just because they're getting that sort of media. Like, how do we ensure that we are still empowering other languages when there's this really predominant language that essentially proliferates so aggressively into the way we talk?
I don't think, first of all, when we talk about this, we have to talk about who's the actor. When you say we, who's the one uplifting languages? Is it, here's what I think, right? I think forced assimilation is not right, but I do think that if you want to assimilate with a culture, so for example, immigrants who are moving to the US, like both of my parents are immigrants, right?
Mm-hmm.
They came here specifically for the economic benefits. If you want to assimilate with a culture, you do have to learn the language, because of the tie with language and intellectualism and how others perceive you. So I went to California recently. Anyone from California or, like, who's Chumash, feel free to fact check me. But basically what we learned about the missions, right? It was there were Spanish missions set up in the Chumash area, and the missions did not try to forcefully assimilate, I think, but that's what I was told. But instead what was happening was the Chumash were being told, like, hey, listen, at the missions, right, they were being attracted by the spirituality and also by the prospects of, like, you know, there's food here. And we grow wheat, and we have cows, and so now there's a steady supply of food. We don't have to do gathering anymore, and so the Chumash learned Spanish. In that way, they could interact with the people around them. So I think it's like, I guess your question would be, if you're doing forced assimilation, I think you have, first of all, it's ethically wrong, but you also have an ethical obligation to preserve the language that you're forcefully assimilating them from. But if you're not doing forced assimilation and someone is joining, it is necessary for them to learn that language. It is up to them to figure out how they want to preserve their traditional language.
So then I have a question for you. If, for example, a culture or a country is forced, so again, I'm going to talk about the Hmong, when they had to flee from the U.S. and they had to go
Flee to the U.S.
Flee to the U.S. from Laos
and China.
They went into the U.S. and they very heavily rejected a lot of the assimilation.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually their children started to become
Assimilated.
Right? But what obligation do you think they have? Because even if they were forced to go to the US.
So the obligation is, it's not so much like you have an obligation to others, it's you have an obligation to yourself. If the goal is to flee and to remain here, and whatever you can do with rejecting the American assimilation, you can do. The thing about assimilation is it opens up opportunities for you. The only obligation you have is if you personally want that, right? It's not that someone is forcing assimilation onto you. It's that you have to adapt and change depending on what you want to get out of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But I think
yeah,
that's the problem with the lingua franca. Like, if you have a lingua franca primarily for, like, global interdependence, you can't have that without some connotation of superiority of a language. Like, it's just not possible. People are going to think English is superior, everyone speaks English.
What do you mean by superior? Like a better language? Or just, because if you think about it, English is it is a superior language, right? Because we're talking about global superpowers. U.S. is the number one global superpower. So by stating that, is that ethically wrong for me to state that U.S. has more? I mean, it's like, I don't know if I agree with it or not, but it is
it's a fact,
right? And so English is, I'm fact checking myself because China's really big, so I don't actually know.
English is not the most spoken language in the world.
Yeah, what is?
I think it's Mandarin.
Yeah, okay. That's
But
what I was
it
assuming.
is the most common second language in the world.
And it's also the most common, I would say, across regions. Because
Yes.
China, the reason why it's the most spoken is because they have a really big country.
Because they have a
versus
really
U.S.
right. It's
English is all around.
like I don't want to embarrass myself. I think
Check
Like-
the list.
Hindi is also a really, really large language.
Yes.
Yeah. But
Mandarin.
and so is Mandarin. But English is the most common second language because the US is such a dominant superpower that
Wait, no, sorry. I just had more to add to the Mandarin. And then, do you want to finish?
Okay, go ahead.
Mandarin Chinese is the world's most spoken language by total number of native speakers, with over 1.1 billion users. However, if you're counting both native and non-native, English is the most spoken language.
Exactly. And because there are so many benefits to learning English. But I think that that's where the problem arises. Like, how have we let our society, our global society, get to the point where English is the most dominant? Why is it?
Economy.
Well,
Yeah.
right,
No.
but hold on. But why is it? Because a lot of people learn English to go to school in the U.S. A lot of people learn English to do business with the U.S. A lot of people learn English for all of these reasons. But why is that? Like, why have we let the U.S. become this superpower instead of making sure that each individual country and each individual society has enough power to sustain itself?
Economist, speak.
Well, I was actually going to say I disagree that it's for economic reasons. I would say that it's actually... So, okay. If you, map cultures, one of the things is, are you a low context or are you a high context language? And a high context would be, Korean, Japanese, very
What's
high
con-
context.
Oh, yes.
And that,
Elaborate.
if you're an island nation, which is, Japan, you can have this highly, concentrated and shared culture where not everything needs to be explicitly said. And so the language kind of frames around that, where you have a lot of this politeness.
Can we find an example? I'm going to find an example while you talk.
Where you have a lot of this, politeness, because people can pick up on the undertones. Not everything needs to be said in a high context culture, because the culture is very shared, people know it. And so you don't need to say everything explicitly.
Would you say it's generally more homogenous?
Yeah.
Okay, here's an example. I'm going to extrapolate from the example, because it's not an implicit example, but, so high context cultures like Japan. Japanese, right? So reading the air is crucial. So if I say no, it would be man, I'm not feeling it or something, right? You know what I mean? It's not a direct no, but in English it has to be direct no. Another thing is so it's implicit communications. Body language plays a part, cues. I'm gonna make up an example. Let's say I'm Japanese and I'm go get the dog. I would do or something instead of being go get the dog. That is not a realistic example at all. I'm not Japanese. But versus in English, you would be go get the dog from outside. Versus in Japan, because of that shared culture, because again, it's a smaller country, so a lot of the people share very similar cultures.
It would be
It would be much more.
if in Japan in a work culture, they'd be oh, can you work this Sunday? And they'd be yeah, it's a really important day, it's my daughter's birthday. And then, the employer would pick up and be
That's a no.
that's a no. English would be oh, we expect them to be there. They said yes, explicitly. Japan, it's no, they said yes, but it really meant no.
And so how do
Which
these...
is interesting, because over text, you know what I mean? You'll be texting someone and be oh, I'm kind of tired today. It's it's a no. Sorry, continue.
But how does this context relate to economy?
Because the U.S. in English, American English, we are the lowest context culture in the world. And so...
Everything has to be stated.
Because we had all this melting pot,
We have so many cultures in it that we're so diverse culturally that we can't just we can't assume that the person next to me knows how my culture operates. So we have to be very specific in English because that's our lingua franca.
So English is very explicit, which lends itself to being a lingua franca. I did not say that right.
Lingua franca, yeah.
Um,
So it connects these cultures.
And it also helps with being a second language in a global economy.
But
do you think that maybe this low or high context?
High context is like the context is
Japanese.
already in your head. Like
Okay.
you already understand what they're gonna say before they say it explicitly.
So high context is
High context is not
You-
America. Low context is when you have to be told in order to understand. So
So-
imagine you don't have the context.
Okay, so low context.
Is English.
So I would say that, don't you think that low context is extremely important for dealing with the economy, to have explicit things said? So maybe there is a correlation with the amount of context you have and working with the economy, because it's extremely, okay, I'm not in econ, but
I don't think she's arguing.
I
Maybe, yeah,
I
you
agree
see.
with you.
Yeah,
I would agree with you, but I think
she thinks it comes
Our-
before economy.
yeah, that would be my point.
Like economy is a subsect of the low context nature of English. The reason why we learn English is because of its low context nature, and economy is like a part of that, but it could also be relationships and blah blah blah. Like everything else could fit in there as well.
well, if we're talking like, yeah, we're talking about like low and high context, but again, if we're also talking about like, so that's like purposeful assimilation with the economy. I mean, like not
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
yeah. So, but if we're talking about forced assimilation with the Native Americans or with Hawaii, right?
Mhm.
I think that primary factor is the economy, like having like doing with greed and like from the colonialists. That's what I mean.
You mean they wanted money, so they had them
Yeah.
learn the language? I think yes, but I think if the I think the way that they achieve that is through power.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Then yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So
Economy, having land, territorialism, control of the populace, etc.
Mhm. yeah, Plato said that the most primitive names and languages give the most correctness. What do you guys think of that? Plato says some interesting things, but that would
repeat it.
primitive languages and names give the most correctness. So I think he's implying accurate.
I think it's because it was kind of like Borges.
I think it's
Bar-
pureness.
all roads lead back
Yeah,
to
I think
Borges.
it's
I would
pureness,
say it's
yeah.
pureness because it's less tainted per se by propaganda, social media, culture development, like
I think it would be. I
malactors.
think it would be like innate to human in terms of pureness, because if you would go back to like cavemen,
I
and
was
it's
just
like,
thinking that.
ow, rock hurts. Well, they wouldn't say that, but it would be like
I was
the
thinking of cave
noises that you
paintings.
create. Yeah, the noises that you create when in response to stepping on a cactus is very like innate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, like I mean, okay. And then now that we have all this cultural, like we don't step on cacti anymore that much, and then we do. We're like, ow, I stepped on a cacti. But it's like, you know, with all the cultures that have developed from those innate kind of human responses, things have changed. So I know this is a really weird example, but like when you sneeze, how do you sneeze?
Hachu.
Achoo, achoo, achoo. In Russian, you go achi. Achi. So I'll go to Russia, and I'll, like, or when I used to go, like, way back when, I would change how I sneezed. And I would start sneezing achi after a month there, and then I would come back and I'd switch back to achoo. Which is really interesting, because it's like, it feels like an innate human response, but it can change dependent on the culture that you're in. So I think when
Like
he talks about-
laughing.
yeah. What's that? You have an example of laughing across different cultures?
I don't know if I don't think I have one that
Ja,
sounds
ja, ja.
different,
Who
but
does ja,
exactly.
ja, ja?
Spanish
Spanish,
people do
yeah.
ja 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 because the like J sounds like an H, but I think it is again common across cultures, almost innate, that when we're laughing we're pushing air out and we're making that huh sound, right? But
Why
also,
do we do
wait,
that?
going back to the quote, I think that it comes from the lack of idioms, which I find really interesting. Okay, so idioms, if you don't know, are like something that we say in a culture, and you have to have that cultural context, because it doesn't actually make sense if you just hear it. Like when I say it's raining cats and dogs outside, someone who's just learning English would be like, no, it's not. It's raining rain outside. But the idiom, and like in our French class, part of the rubric to get a higher score is to say an idiom. Because an idiom shows that you have learnt the language and that you are immersed within the culture. Because you can learn a language perfectly and still not actually be able to communicate. When I see French TikToks, I'm like, what are they talking about? Because they're saying a bunch of things that don't make sense when you're just learning the vocabulary, because it's a lot of cultural context. And what Plato is saying is that primitive languages don't have all of that cultural baggage behind it, and therefore everything that is said explicitly.
Yeah.
It is raining water outside.
If we think about all literary devices, right? Is an idiom?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a stupid question. Like idioms, allegory, illusions,
Oh my god.
metaphors, like there's a degree of subjectivity and there's a degree of cultural historical baggage to it, right? If we're looking at paintings, it's literally what they see. There's no baggage because they're the first, right? Like it's as we progress, there's going to be more complexivity. Is that a word?
Complexity.
Okay, it was a word, I just said it wrong. Okay, so, but like, then I have a question. If 3,000 years from now, how do you think, okay, excluding if we're going to be living, how do you think we're going to be talking?
Very differently. Actually,
ChatGPT will be talking for us.
this brings up a huge phenomenon within a lot of communities where, okay, we're dumping nuclear waste, right? Because we make nuclear waste, so we have to dump it somewhere. That nuclear waste is super radioactive, and therefore we need to make sure that people don't step on it.
Are you talking about the spikes?
Yes. I'm talking about the spikes. I love the
Yes,
spikes.
the spikes. Hold an image.
People, we need to make sure that people don't go near it, or else they'll be exposed to radioactive elements, which is super dangerous for them. But in 3,000 years, we don't know how they're going to be talking. We don't know how they're going to interpret things. We can't say, don't go here, because language changes over time. We can't show a photo of a skull and crossbones, because people will interpret that differently as culture evolves.
I also disagree with Plato. Like, I don't think it's better.
That's what it would look like. The
I think-
proposed spikes to just be like, don't go there. That hurts.
Don't go there.
Nah.
Well, I don't think he said better. He said degree of correctness. I mean, he said correctness.
But is it really correct? Because isn't correctness conveying in its, like, truest essence the feeling and emotion and, like, what you want to say? And can you really do that with primitive words?
Yeah, that's true. In primitive drawings, where it's literally
God dang it hurts.
physicality. So,
I can.
What?
Wait, if I'm in a primitive language and I'm like, I step on something, like I can pretty well communicate. Like, I'm in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Right, but can you
Right.
communicate that it is raining super heavily outside? Because I can say it's raining cats and dogs outside, and people know, oh my god, it's
Insane.
raining.
Yeah.
I can say it's sprinkling outside. I can say, oh, it's drizzling outside. And all of that leads to more degrees of correctness because it's more specific.
but okay,
Well, it's raining
When
cats
I-
and dogs can't be that specific because there's
But
not literal cats and dogs.
With
Cultural context.
with cultural context, it's very specific.
so to contrast though, in the future, when I thought of how we will be speaking, I thought of two different roads. So we all know the literary crisis. For some context, literary crisis is literacy crisis is where our generations. This is I think the first generation, I believe.
Is this Resig?
These
spec?
kids can't talk.
No, this
This
is
is what
Gen Alpha.
Um,
Gen Alpha.
we're
is
the
the first.
first.
No,
yeah.
Gen Alpha is the
Talk
first.
more read.
We're the first.
No, we're not.
Gen Alpha.
We're not Gen Alpha.
We're not Gen Alpha.
Split us from. I like tuned you guys out. And I didn't know what you guys. Okay, so Gen Alpha is the first generation to see a decrease in literacy rates, and there were statistics. I'm not sure the specific ones, but some kids graduate school without reading an entire novel, right? Because
No freaking way.
no, yeah,
It's
Are
really
you being
bad.
serious?
a lot of kids. They get away
Oh
with-
no, yeah,
They watch
I
the
believe
movie.
that.
Yeah, they watch a
They-
movie that
They read
lit,
Spark Notes.
lit, whatever. Like a lot of kids get away with it, but also it's not even included. There are so many curriculums that don't require reading a book. They have passages. They have passages. So there's a literacy crisis, right? In ways that if we see far back in the I want to say 60s, if you watch presidential speeches, they they talk like they write, right? They talk like they write a lot longer. A couple years forward, the next presidencies, the presidents would speak shorter, incrementally less complicated, not as how they would write, but as how they would speak. There has become a clear divide in how we speak versus how we write, right? But see, like, I would never talk. I mean, I would never write the way I talk,
Like-
right? But they would years ago.
We do Lincoln Douglas debate, and that's like framed after like Lincoln
Abe Lincoln
Right.
and Stephen
against
Douglas, right?
against Stephen Douglas debate. No one would ever sit down
And
for a Lincoln Douglas debate.
No.
It's like
speak like that. Like, it's
today.
when you write the speeches and you just like listen to yourself back and you're like, my first contention is nobody talks like that. Not even in politics
Yeah.
anymore, right? It's not even my first argument is that it's just straight
Yeah.
bleh. Like literally kind of what the conversations that we're talking about that we are having where we're just speaking normally as we do with friends. That's kind of language has become less formal
Yeah.
as we progress.
So that definitely ties in with our literacy abilities, because there was a clear correlation of writing abilities and speaking abilities. So to make the point quicker, we have seen a clear decrease in our literacy abilities, basically. But there's also going to be increased cultural and historical baggage with that. So there's going to be two sides. There's going to be more complex cultural historical knowledge that we can add with our that we can have with our idioms, with our allegories, what you were
With
saying,
our slang.
with our slang, but there's also going to be less literacy ability. So how do you think our language will look like then?
Emojis.
Oh,
I've seen that theory.
Wait, that's actually
LOL emoji. That's how I respond to text now, because I just like the message. It's really bad. Well, I will send not paragraphs, but like broken up sentences that kind of form a paragraph. But it is so much. I don't text like
I just heart everything.
I text how I speak. I actually do write how I speak, the way I do, because the way I speak is very it's not formal at all.
I think people will lose the ability to write much faster than they will lose the ability to
Speak,
talk.
yeah.
Exactly. Because the ability to write comes from the ability to read.
Mhm.
The reason why I think at least we can write to such a degree of formality is because we read books in that same level of formality, and we read papers and all of that. Like, at least I know for myself, when I'm reading something and it has a very distinct voice, almost immediately after, if I have to write something, that voice gets translated into what I'm writing. I will copy the author's voice.
also just words. You're picking
Exactly. You're picking up words, you're picking up styles of writing, and that is how you become a better writer, and that's how you change like the degree of formality at which you're writing. And without kids reading, we lose the ability to write.
But then people will, I think, lose the ability to talk about things critically. To like actually have a functional debate, like education-wise, and also ivory tower education.
You wanna bring
Intellection?
context?
Translation.
Intellection. One thing I wanted to talk about was we're gonna go back to immigration. We're gonna talk about how immigrants who come to this country and don't learn English or learn English, broken English, are generally stereotyped as less intellectual. You could have 160 IQ. Maybe you learn a language faster if you have a higher IQ. I'm not actually sure how that works, what the correlation is there. But you could have like a very high IQ. You could be a very respected person in your country. Come here, and just because you don't know the language, because you're like new to it, people may automatically assume that you are dumber. And I mean, that's a horrible stereotype, but it is something that kind of triggers that assimilation that we were talking about earlier, the self-brought on assimilation, is like, if you are, the reason why you are considered less intellectual because you don't know language is because it forces a dependency from you onto others. You don't have the same level of autonomy. For example, if you can't order in a different country, like let's say I'm in Spain and I can't order without.
You can order.
I can order. I can order.
France,
I can order.
You can't order in
I could be like, baguette, merci.
How
You're gonna eat a baguette?
How do you say please? Merci beaucoup.
What's
Merci beaucoup. I said merci beaucoup. Alright, I could not order in France or like China, but I can do a lot of that in America, right? Because I know English. And if even if I have broken grammar, like that automatically people are now unable to understand you without the help of a translator or sometimes without the help of technology, and because of that, you are now dependent on someone else. And an interesting thing about intelligence is it's often associated with, autonomy. How well can you do things on your own without the help of others? Which intelligence is a different topic. We can talk about a different time. But yeah.
I will say that I'm an international kid, right? I have only lived in the US for a total of 3 years. That is still instilled within me. And I find myself talking, I don't know if this is good or bad, I don't know, but talking slower and being like, yes, I can do that. Or like...
From international school you have this, or from...
I don't know. Maybe from summers of coming back to the US, but talking... Maybe looking down, I'm not sure, I can't reflect on that right now, but to that's too deep.
We're not going into that right now.
It's not psychotherapy.
Talking to people who struggle to speak English as a first language. Obviously, if I'm in Jakarta, if I'm in Indo, everyone speaks. In the international school, everyone speaks because they're all rich. If I'm in Manila, everyone speaks English because they're all rich. That has to do, I think, with my instilled oppression. I think oppression is a strong word, but stereotype within my brain with intellect. Because if I'm going to these international schools and everyone speaks English and someone can't, then I think that's gonna be conferred.
Reflex.
Yeah.
I actually have a personal experience. I wanted to share a personal experience too. I take this debate kind of class. It's like a philosophy class. It's really interesting. It's more about critical thinking and learning how to critical think. But I took it with a teacher who spoke Russian and with a student who spoke only Russian, right? And I'm coming in and I'm like, okay, I'm going to speak Russian because they're not going to learn English for me, and they're already speaking Russian, the course is set there, whatever. So I come in, and this student who I'm going against, he's a little older than me, he's a boy, and he basically treats me like I'm stupid, because when we're arguing, I have to debate against him, and when I'm debating him, I can't articulate my ideas, and it's just so frustrating, because I'm trying to articulate what I think about a topic, and I know I like to debate in English. In English, I could just, say what I wanted to say, but because I have to translate it to Russian, a lot of things are getting missed out from my arguments. And he's like, well, I don't understand her argument because she's not saying it clearly. And I'm like, debate me in English. I promise we would have a better time. I would have a better time, right? And so when we're talking about this intellectualism, it's like, he basically considered me, he would call me basically stupid, because I couldn't respond to his arguments in a proper way. And that was just that was tying back to my point, but to tie to your points about money and about intellectualism and about language, I think another place you can see this is probably, convenience. Because I think when you don't have as much time, when you have money, you have a lot of time to do things. And when you don't, I think that language becomes a thing of convenience, because I'm not out here, if I'm trying to get a point across, or whatever, I'm much more casual with them. Like, okay, we need to get a point across. Let's talk about academia, right? Academia, when you get the point across, it's not like, okay, here's a 10-sentence rundown. It's more like, okay, we're going to write out this whole thing of formalities. And I understand why that's a thing. I understand why that's a standard. But I do think that creates a barrier for people who don't have the time, don't have the resources. And we were talking about academic writing, and I think you can talk about that more than I can. I'm just trying to segue to it. Do you have points? Okay.
So, obviously, academic writing is very indecipherable. Just start off there. No one can read that, except, PhD students, but,
ChatGPT.
Everyone else, we don't understand. It's, 44 pages of that. And I think this feeds into the fact that there's such an ivory tower around academics, where you have this select group of people, and I think there's been research on this where professors have tracked over with AI, and it's the top layer students are still the same, but everyone else is worse. The middle of people who were mediocre are now just
wait,
bad.
what do they test?
Yeah, what are they testing
Yeah.
for?
Writing.
Writing
basically,
skills.
of like their abilities, like in college classes.
It's like the best people have stayed the same,
yeah.
but people who are slightly under the best have dropped. It's the literacy decrease.
Yeah. And so this makes it so it's like, what is this difference? And also,
Yeah, okay, I actually have a personal example about this. One time, I think this was English class maybe, I got feedback on an essay that I wrote that said that I was too informal. Despite the fact that I had, not to like toot my own horn or anything, but like I had a proper structure. I was getting my points across, but I did it in a way where maybe I used more colloquial slang, or like I said something and I didn't have like a sentence structure that was very academic, and so I got points off for not being like super academic about my writing, instead of being graded on the actual points that I was making. And I know that for English, a lot of like there is a whole rubric about like language usage, but why is academic writing part of that language usage instead of just like grammar and like conjugation and spelling?
wait, I'm gonna jump on this, and like also kind of related to what you guys were talking about is within English, I feel like you see a little bit of like I have family both like very north and very south, and when I go up north, like everyone's like, you sound so southern, like you sound so like you speak so southern.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And
That's perspective.
and
Say y'all.
no, it's
Okay.
Their accent is like
No. Alright, everyone make fun of it.
That's literally gonna prove her point in like
Yeah.
2 seconds.
And so when you're thinking about who founded these institutions that are determining what academic writing is, I would say you have like the Silicon Valley, and then you have the New England institutions.
Northern intellectual elite.
Yes. And so you have these two spheres, and everything like the South, like low-key, there's a little bit of like Northern elitism where like there's a little bit of like Southerns are stupid, I'm not gonna lie. Rural Southerns are stupid is the like stereotype a little bit. And so also there's like a difference in understanding. Like when I went to Boston for the first time and I like could not understand them. Like man was speaking English, I was like, I don't know what you're saying, because I was trying to get directions.
Boston.
Yeah, I did not know. So it's very, yeah, I'm gonna leave it
I
there.
wanted to add to the northern intellectual elite versus versus Silicon Valley. I think that the northern intellectual elite have kind of ruled over academic writing and over
American.
these spheres. Yeah. Over American kind of perception of what being an intellectual is for a really long time. And with that comes that predominance of academic writing, of formality. I think that it's shifted to Silicon Valley now because I don't know why, maybe tech because they come from the northern intellectual elite. Like a lot of them do. They come from the Ivy Leagues, but they moved to Silicon Valley. And what I've noticed is that, especially right now with our generation, it's so much less formal. And I don't know if you guys know who Roy Lee is from Cluely. He's like this founder, and he's considered very smart because he made a lot of money. I don't know if his company's actually doing anything right now, but he's very big on media, right? And because of that, we now see these people who are considered smart, who speak very informally, and who speak very casually and with a lot of slang. But we've kind of shifted away from academic writing, at least in our perception of what intelligence is. Yeah. However, I think that the institutions are not catching up with trends. And that's why because as our language is shifting, I think that education has always been behind the industry. Education takes a while because it's so heavily regulated, and the industry is also kind of regulated, but not really. And so because of that, we're still... because of these intellectual people in Silicon Valley being a lot more general, it was about education not catching up to industry because of regulation, and industry's not as regulated. And so education hasn't caught up with the trends of us moving away from academic writing as a sign of intellectualism. And also because we're in the northern region, it's also like, what I'm saying is that they're catching up with the trends a lot faster because California is less regulated than Virginia in terms of education. It's a lot more like all over the place, and Virginia has very specific counties. Do you know what I mean? And California is like public and because of the major cities in California, public and private and charter. Also, charter schools don't exist in Virginia. Did you know that? They're not allowed. It's really weird.
Yeah. Adding on to this point, I think that it's actually a symptom of our times because.
Oh, are we just doing the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Anyways, I think that the fact that we have moved away from academic writing is a symptom of our times and our culture because we have now put such a profound, I'm thinking of a word, emphasis on STEM, on science and technology and mathematics, and especially engineering. And Silicon Valley is a bunch of business people making tech. So of course they're not going to care about academic writing because they probably were bad at English and humanities. I don't want to say anything about them, actually.
I would say they don't care about academic writings because academic writing can't appeal to a population, and business is all about appealing to the population. It's the same thing with debate. Like, if I'm actually debating and I'm actually using my first contention, nobody cares. Nobody's going to listen to me. Versus if I talk to them in a more persuasive manner, kind of like speech, kind of not, but more like, guys, this is what's important. Here's my product. Here's a 10-second overview. This is what it's going to do. It's going to shift the world. Versus this product goes, and like whatever, however academic writing does it. That's why business people don't focus on the humanities as much and on academic writing as much, is because they're trying to appeal to a majority to sell. Versus academic writing,
it's
not so
towards
much.
the northern intellectual elite.
Also, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just like wrapping up my point here. I think that the reason why we don't care about academic writing as much as a people, as like a generation, is because we all want to be those business founders in Silicon Valley. We don't care about being the northern intellectual elite because we see them as elitist, which is another symptom of how our words are changing. The elite is not a good thing anymore. Like, this is not something that we want to be. We want to be the cool Silicon Valley guys who don't care about academic writing.
Yeah, so technology is really changing how we approach language. Continue.
I'm gonna get flamed for this. I feel like it's a recession indicator. I feel like the reason is because we've had a devaluing of academics and education for education's sake, and now everything is like, you need to look at your job market for your major. Is your major gonna make money? Are you gonna pay off your loans?
Yeah.
And there's less of a like, just get a college degree. Like, my mother's generation is like, her father was just like, go to college.
Yeah, go to college,
do
get a
something.
degree, you're gonna get a job. Versus now it's like, oh, you want to major in computer science? Good luck. Oh, you want to major in, you want to become a consultant? No. You want to do this? AI is going to replace you. And actually, interesting thing about that is I was thinking about the Great Depression recently.
Period.
Because, of course, that's my Roman Empire. No. But,
I actually am.
Industrial Revolution.
okay, so, but the thing about the Great Depression, right? The thing that was happening was that people were being replaced by automation. And also there's just like people, there was a lot of different factors, but people were being kicked out of their jobs. But once they were kicked out of their jobs, they didn't have purchasing power. They couldn't buy anything that the corporations were creating. And because of that, corporations were like, oh shit, and they lost money.
Let's make jobs.
But now, what's going to happen with AI? This is very off topic of of language, so I'm really sorry, but I just thought this was an interesting point, is when AI is replacing these jobs, people are losing their purchasing power. Does it even affect the people who are number one right now, who are elite? Does it affect their corporations? I mean, it does, but what's going to happen?
I don't think it directly
but does it?
But
I think because our culture, we have gotten to a point in our culture where consumerism is such a huge part of our identity. Every single time I scroll on TikTok, first of all, I see a bunch of ads. I see people selling me stuff all the time. I see people saying, oh my god, you need to go buy this thing.
Buy this AI study tool right now.
Exactly. It's such a huge part of our culture to buy things. And therefore, despite the fact that we are economically struggling, and despite the fact that a lot of people are losing their jobs, and maybe they don't have a lot of job security because of AI, they don't stop buying stuff because we have been programmed into this culture of consumerism.
Back to language with consumerism, because we're so focused on buying, that's why we're more informal, and that's why we're more, I would say, urgent even. You can't sell with academic writing. As much as some academics like to believe, if I'm reading your 44-page paper on a product, it's over. It's over. Like, I don't lowered attention span, that kind of thing, and because of that, language is starting to become less formal. you're not talking when you're selling a product. You're not like, ladies and gentlemen, we are selling AI.
A 2x4
We are selling a neural network that specializes in language in order to help your kids study. It's just AI. It's just AI. Study AI, and it's so much more like abbreviated and so much more quick and convenient, and that's why the language is shifted.
If you're thinking about Shark Tank, you have to keep the attention of the people that are buying, because if you don't, like, what we've been told, this is even like for science fair, we've been told you need to be able to give an elevator pitch of what it is. It needs to be as quick, and you need to be able to sell to the judges what you are selling. So at this point, like, okay, my science fair experiment, it was so dumb. I was cutting spring onions, and Miss Osborne told me, because of my presentation skills, that I could possibly make it to regionals because of my presentation skills, because I was actually excited about my topic. They couldn't even see my video. RIP. But like, I actually don't care that much. But like, there's such a trade-off, or I don't want to say trade-off, but there's
an emphasis on oral language over written language nowadays, because written language doesn't carry the same impact. And it's that, but also written language doesn't carry the same impact. I think
Attention span.
with AI, because written language can be replicated so quickly, people want to see humanity. They do. We are inherently social creatures, and so because of that, we place a lot more emphasis on, can you personally sell me your product? Not some write-up that makes it look really fancy. I don't care how complicated it is. I care about you as a person selling it to me. People are only going to sell to you if they enjoy your words, if they enjoy your speaking. And so because of that,
they think you're charismatic and attractive.
Yeah, and so because of that literacy crisis is increasing, because people don't need to write as much anymore. They need to focus on oral skills, and I personally don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. I think that's just a symbol of how culture has been shifted because of all the different factors that our global and political state of the world right now has contributed.
I also think the downside is that people are losing their ability to create something from scratch. Like, I think the way people are creating and writing nowadays is they're having AI generate something, and then they're fixing what the AI gives them, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, they're adding their own touch to it.
It's not original.
But no one's making anything from scratch.
All right. So to end, I think a really cool way to summarize what we've done today.
Everyone say a word.
Say goodbye, or say goodbye in a different language.
I call adios.
Au revoir.
We'll say it.
Adios.
До свидания.
Au revoir.
Bye.